Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War battle report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Empire of Dust versus the Forces of Nature. This battle was fought at 2250 points and the scenario was loot. So first off, we have my opponent's list, which opens with a regiment of Naiad Heartpiercers with the Jar of the Four Winds. Then we have two hordes of elementals, one of whom is Earth with Brew of Strength and the other is Fire. Then we have a regiment of Forest Shamblers with the Diadem of Dragonkind, two Tree Herders, one of whom has the Aura of Heroism 2 spell and the Banner of the Griffin, while the other has Critter's Call 8 and Blade of Slashing. Then we have two Winged Unicorns, both of whom have got the Lightning Bolt 5 upgrade, and one has Mirrodin's Amulet of the Fireheart. Then we finish it out with two Beasts of Nature, both of whom have Lightning Bolt 6, Vicious, 7 attacks, and Wings. So my thoughts on this list are that it's a very compact list. It's very tough, assuming it gets the right matchups, but it really comes down to that. It has to get the right matchups, has to get the right scenario. So I'm not for it or really against it. I think it's okay. There are a few things that I don't particularly like, and things that I really do. I am missing 15 points off this list. I'm pretty sure that means that the Fire Elementals either have Brew of Courage or Brew of Haste, but I can't remember if they had anything, so I just didn't put it down. The only thing I really don't like in this list is the Diadem of Dragonkind Forest Shamblers. It might be useful some of the time, getting that advanced deployment or that push up, and then being able to surge and get 12 more attacks, but a regiment of Forest Shamblers is pretty much just there to die. I'd rather take that 30 points and the 15 points maybe on the Fire Elementals and give them Brew of Sharpness, or something like that. But otherwise, I do think the list is pretty cool. I really like the new Aura of Heroism. It's not quite as good as it used to be with the 3 dice, but the fact that you can A, cast it on yourself, and B, when you cast it on yourself, you get +1/+1 nerve, is pretty good. That's a good buff, and on a Tree Herder is actually really good because it makes the Tree Herder a 19/21 with Def 6 and then giving out Rally 2 as long as you pass one of your 4+ rolls. So that's very tough. So anyway, enough about that list. Let's move on to mine. It's the one I've been playing for a while, and you'll see in a second a mistake I made with that. So first off, we have the Mummy's Revenge formation, which has the Cursed High Priest with heal 4 and 2 regiments of mummies. Then I have a horde of skeleton archers, a horde of skeleton warriors with Banner of the Griffin, a horde of enslaved guardians with the Orcish Skull Pull. Now, here's the thing, I actually played this as Brew of Haste the entire game. I don't know why. Oh, I do know why. I like having Brew of Haste on guardians. It lets them do a lot of things, but I didn't actually take it. So technically, I'm playing 10 points over this game. So unfortunate, but it happens sometimes. Then we have two regiments of Revenant Chariots, an Ammonite Pharaoh on Royal Chariot with Blade of Slashing and Blizzard 2, Mortibris, of course, and then a Bone Giant, a Scorpion Husk, and a Soul Snare. So you already know my thoughts on this list. They haven't really changed. The Scorpion Husk is terrible. I know some people, actually there was a revisited thread on the, I think it's on the Empire of Dust category in Facebook, where I was having a pretty interesting discussion with someone about things that they could do about the Scorpion Husk, that right now it feels pretty much just like a bad Bone Giant. I'd rather just find the 45 points in my army, which I could find, to get a second Bone Giant. The Scorpion Husk doesn't offer a whole lot. And we talked about some of the things they could do, like give it Nimble and Pathfinder, but then my rebuttal to that is that just makes it a bad Bone Dragon instead of a bad Bone Giant. I'd really like it to actually get a bump in nerve. It's only a -14. That's just not good enough. If we're at a -16 or even a -17, -17 would be excellent. And maybe Big Shield, I think it would have a place. The other thing you could do is definitely give it that Pathfinder Nimble and maybe, I don't know, do something else. But then it's a bit too much like the Knucker is, and while the Knucker is, is a 3+ melee and all that, I think the Knucker is actually a little too good at the moment, and the Scorpion Husk probably doesn't need to follow suit on that. I'd prefer to see a more defensive kit. But anyway, I digress. Let's move forward. So first off, we have the deployment, and let's talk about loot for a second here. So loot has 3 loot counters, very apropos name. on the direct center of the table. So first off, you put one in the direct center, actually the center line. So you put one in the direct center, and then each player places one objective in order. My opponent placed this one here. I placed this one here. You can kind of tell that at least I'm an ex-War Machine player, and we just set up an incursion board. I actually, for a second there, thought about placing an objective over here in the woods, just to make it so this was the table, as I have a small army, but my opponent has an even smaller army. And so I went, well, I don't want to try to outgrind a bunch of earth elementals and such, especially around a forest where he has an entire army of Pathfinder and I have none. I have one Strider and that's it. So anyway, I'll move forward. Let's talk about the terrain real quick. So starting on the right, we have a height 6 forest, and then right below it, we have a height 2 hill with a height 1 obstacle on top of it, so some layered terrain there. Then we have, I'm not sure what we were running this as, maybe height 4, height tall enough, really, obstacle. I think it was height 4. And then next to that, we have a height 0 graveyard, so not height flat, meaning that if you're behind this graveyard and you are height 2 or under, you will get cover because shots will pass over it, just like normal cover instead of the height flat idea. Then next to the graveyard, off to the left, we have the beginning of, I believe this is another height 2 hill. It's about like that. Then above it, we have another height 2 hill with 2 height 1 obstacles attached to it. We got a little angry face here going on. So there, and then to the right of that, we have a height 6 forest, and finally to the right of that, we have another height 0 graveyard. So that's the terrain. An interesting approach. My opponent actually set this table up, and I think he just sort of put the terrain out as if we were going to set up, and then didn't really adjust it, because you can see there's no terrain in the middle of this table, which is a bit of a problem, especially considering he's playing Forces of Nature. So I guess if you're gonna set up a table to be not advantageous towards one side, set it up to not be advantageous towards yours. So anyway, moving on to deployment. So first off, we have my opponent on the left here. We have the first Beast of Nature, this big eagle guy. Then next to him, this unit of like Norse archers. That's the Naiad Heartpiercers. I actually really like these models. They're Mersha something. I know they're from Mersha. I just don't remember what they are. Then to the right of that, we have the first unicorn. It's actually facing the direct opposite direction, but a lot of these models don't play well with each other. Then in front of the unicorn, we have the first tree herder. And this tree herder is the one with Banner the Griffin and Aura of Heroism. And I believe it's already vanguarded forward. Then in this blurry picture, to the right of that tree herder, we have these walrus guys. These are the earth elementals. Actually, my opponent runs these models as water elementals sometimes, and I think that's a much better fit, both for what this army does and just, they're walruses. They're definitely Tuskar. So I look at them and I go, I don't see earth elemental, but I digress. I don't really care that much. Then to the right of that, we have a really cool looking tree herder model. I believe this is also a Mersha model, some sort of swamp monster. And then to the right of that, we have some fire drakes. These are the fire elementals. I really like them. And then, let's walk back. So in front of the fire elementals, we have the regiment of tree herders with the diadem. And then off here in the far right, we have the second unicorn and the second beast in front of it. So that's my opponent's deployment. Let's go into the Empire of Dust here. So this is actually a little, anyway, let's move forward. So my vanguarded Scorpion Husk right there. And this is on the right side of the table as my pictures will show. So starting on the left of that, we have the Tomb Scorpion. Then we have the first regiment of chariots. They've already moved forward because this is a bit into turn 1. But then we have the Guardian, or the Skeleton Archers back there. Next to the Skeleton Archers, we have the Chariot, the Pharaoh Chariot, and then this model right here is being run as my Mortibris today. I probably won't use it as Mortibris in the future, but one of my opponents had actually, or one of my regular opponents had, he gave me this model the other day because he's been buying a bunch of the old Tomb Kings. He already bought an Apophis in a deal that he got recently. He got another Apophis, and since he had Long story short, he had received some models that I sold to another person who hadn't paid me for them yet. He went, listen, we'll just call it even. And yeah, I'm into it. I would have just given him anyway, so it's always nice to, get a little something in return though. So yeah, that Apophis model today is being run as Mortibris, not as Apophis. That'd be confusing. Then in front of Mortibris in the chariot, we have the Bone Giant. To the right of it, we have the first regiment of mummies. Then right behind this rock, we have the Soul Snare. And then to the right of the Soul Snare, we have the second regiment of mummies. To the right of that, we have the Enslaved Guardians, who today have speed 7 for reasons. Behind them, we have the horde of skeleton warriors. Then behind the skeleton warriors, we have the Cursed High Priest, and finally the second regiment of chariots. So my opponent and I roll off to see who goes first, turn 1, and Empire of Dust wins the roll-off, so this is why the deployment pictures looked a little janky, because I forgot to take them before I'd moved. So yeah, we move forward, and I basically just am trying to cut off the flanks here for my opponent, since they have 1, 2, 3, 4 flying monsters. I don't want them to be able to just run around my lines and be able to move into my center like that. So I move my chariots. I don't really care too much about line of sight, because one of the nice things about having a shambling army is that I can always just turn these chariots, move them, and then cast Surge on them anyway. So yeah, I move them in like this just to keep him honest, and if they want to fly over me, it's going to be difficult to dodge just due to Surge. The rest of the army just moves forward as fast as it can. I think the giant holds back a little bit, as does the pharaoh. But the infantry moves forward. And here is where that brew of haste, the first thing comes into play, which is I deployed my. I actually deployed the Enslaved Guardians behind these warriors, and because they're speed 7, they can jump over them, where they speed 6, they actually can't. They don't have enough movement. So yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I jumped them over the line there, and then I scoot the warriors a little bit to the right to extend my aura of rally a little bit more. The only thing that doesn't move, well, there are 2. One is the Tomb Scorpion, and that's honestly just because I forgot about him. But my opponent was like, well, you can move him, at the end of my turn anyway if I wanted to. And I was like, nah, he doesn't really need to move, and I'd rather just play this as cleanly as possible, which is funny because I forgot about these guys. But anyway, the only thing that doesn't move purposefully are these skeleton archers, and that's because I always just surge them forward anyway, because a 5+ to hit is negative enough for me. So moving into shooting, all of my shooting goes into these shamblers. I do 6 damage to them, which is pretty crazy, and that's actually because I know the blizzard hits twice and does no damage, but then I believe the chariots on the right shot them as well and did 1 damage maybe, but then the skeleton archers just light them up, and on 6s to hit, 5s to wound, they do 5 wounds. So some lucky shooting there. But I don't manage to get a kill, and they are left on the table at the end of the turn. I mean, I need an 8 twice, so not the most likely, but pretty good start, and we'll move forward onto the Forces of Nature. So Forces of Nature, it might look like I haven't changed the slide, but they just didn't really move at all, which is, I guess, a pretty good idea right now because I'm pretty outgunned. I have some sizable amounts of shooting, but almost all my shooting is no piercing, right? So when I shoot into my opponent, I don't have any piercing, while he has all, and then most of the army here is def 5 or def 6, right? So not the best damage output, while my opponent has, I believe, 22 lightning bolt to shoot at me, 12 of which has vicious. So yeah, just hold back for a little bit, utilize that speed and lightning bolt. And yeah, so my opponent does that. So first off, this beast and this unicorn fire into these chariots, doing 7 wounds to them. So pretty good, but not untankable. And then the rest of the shooting goes into the other chariots, who took 2 or 3 wounds from the combined lightning bolt of these guys, but it's 3 wounds because I remember these guys are on boxcars. My opponent doesn't roll it, and then these ones are on, I believe they're a dash 16 right now due to the rally, so my opponent needs a 9 and needs it twice because they are within inspiring range. So no deaths so far, but some okay damage. And we move on to turn 2. So turn 2, for the Empire of Dust, we do get our first charge, which is these chariots who were here just roll into the Beast of Nature. There is a wall directly under me, so this will be a hindered charge, but I'm just looking to cause a wound to this Beast of Nature. I want to turn off its lightning bolt. I want to turn off its ability to fly around. Otherwise, I don't really care. And again, the way I use chariot regiments and Empire of Dust, the way I think they should be used is just as this sort of, I believe people call them like medium chaff. I just view everything as chaff. Everything is chaff until I need it, right? So anyway, these guys are pretty good because they can do damage to you. They are a legitimate threat. They're pretty decent with 8 attacks, Thunder 2, Speed 8, right? And then they're Def 4 with Dash 15 Nerve, so they're pretty difficult to take out. And my opponent basically has to deal with them and has to put more resources into them than you would think to really kill off chariots. So yeah, I'm just looking to put a wound on this beast and force it to charge me for another turn. Maybe the unicorn will go in as well, since it has looks like it has a pretty juicy flank there. But we'll see. As for the rest of the army, again, it just moves forward. My opponent has me pretty a lot more, has me outranged because I don't have any flyers. He said, yeah, so I don't have any flyers and I barely have anything that doesn't shamble. So I can only move as fast as I can move. So I just advanced forward. My opponent had intelligently placed his models outside of 23. So my Soul Snare could not shoot turn 1. And then this turn placed all his models outside of 14. So my Bone Giant, it could charge, because I could move 7 and then get an 8-inch surge because I've got surge 8 here and then surge 10 here, surge 10 here, but that's not the best. So instead everything moves forward. This purple die right here represents how far the earth elementals can charge. So because they're the slowest, I don't really care if something like the Forest Shambler comes or the Tree Herder comes into me, although I don't want that, but I don't think it's going to do a whole lot to any of my frontline units here. And the only thing I really want to stop is the Earth Elementals from getting a native charge into me, because it means that these can charge, these can charge, these can charge, right? And that's just too many for any of my units to really take with any hope of surviving. So instead I just stay out, but I couldn't actually move up to their maximum speed because my opponent has been so cagey in their movement. So not that big of a deal. The other purple die, or the pink die, not purple, represents how far this Beast of Nature can charge. So I'm just keeping the archers and the pharaoh out of its charge range, along with the mummies. But I believe this Bone Giant is in its charge range, or maybe it's... No, I don't think the Bone Giant is in the charge range either. Either way, the Bone Giant, this model over here, this Beast of Nature, is just barely in the Bone Giant's front arc anyway. So if it wants to come in, it can suicide all at once. I do move the Tomb Scorpion this time, but I just readjust him a little bit so he's facing like this, just in case, again, that Beast of Nature wants to come in. I believe the chariots are within charge range, so he can do what he wants, but he will eat this Tomb Scorpion. So that's the plan. With shooting, let's go over. Oh, so let's talk about the shooting real quick. Again, my opponent did cast heal onto the Shamblers during his previous turn. Healed only 2 wounds off of them, I believe, from this unicorn. So they're down to 4 wounds on them. So I have the full archers who currently have an unobstructive shot. Well, they are in the cover, so they will be on 6s. I've got some chariots on 6s, so I've got 28 shots here on 6s. I've got 2 shots on 4s that D6 blast, and then I do move the Soul Snare into range, so I have 10 shots on 4s and 4s that also heal me. So yeah, with all that, I end up doing 4 wounds to these Shamblers, mostly because I don't roll that well with the Soul Snare, which is the sort of the big money shot, as these guys just aren't that combat effective at taking down high def units. So I end up doing, I think, 1 wound, or maybe I did 0 with a Soul Snare, which is really unfortunate because I want to get rid of these Shamblers right now as they're wounded. My opponent has a lot of heal and low unit count, so I'm really looking to drop any unit that I can. But yeah, because I wanted to actually take these 2 archer units, and fire into this unicorn. That'd be a much better target. Unicorns are relatively soft compared to this army. They are def 5, but they're only 12-14 nerve. and dropping unicorns is always a good idea. I actually did make a mistake with my Pharaoh, which again, my opponent was like, you can just move it if you want it. But I went, no, I made this bed and I will lie in it, which is the Pharaoh should have been scooted back just a little bit and maybe facing a bit more like this to also shoot into the unicorn. But I didn't think about it when I was moving the Pharaoh. And then I didn't think about it after I had, well, not moved these 2 units. But it doesn't matter because the Soul Snare does nothing, so the Pharaoh and the chariots, or the Pharaoh and the other archers, try to take down the Shamblers and only manage 4 damage. And yeah, my opponent did get off the Aura of Heroism, so this tree right now is just perfectly within 6 inches of the Shamblers. So rocking, they are a dash 16, I want to say, meaning I would have needed to roll an 8 twice to kill him again. But I go with my Enslaved Guardians here, who cast Wind Blast and actually push this thing the full 5 inches back. So it's back there. You know, if you're trying to draw a triangle, guys, that makes this greater than 6. It can't be 6 since this was 6, right? So A, B, C. So anyway, my opponent is now out of range of being able to cast or being able to get that rally going. So now with the 8 wounds, I only need a 6 twice, which is doable, but I don't roll a 6 once. So instead, they're just fine. In the charge here, my chariots do exactly what I wanted them to do. They do 1 wound. That's all I need. You know, they don't get a box card. They don't do anything crazy. But they do heal 1 wound and stop this beastie from being able to shoot or fly. And we move on to turn 2 for the Forces of Nature. So first up, the Beast of Nature goes into my wounded chariots. These chariots are now at 6 wounds because they healed 1 due to life leech. So Beast of Nature should, let's see, on average, it's got 7 attacks, right? So it gets, you know, 2-ish misses, 5 hits, and then wounds me on 2. So it's going to do around 5 wounds on average due to Vicious. So yeah, that's not looking great for the chariots, but we will see about it. I think my opponent made maybe the right call not bringing the unicorn in. I mean, right now I think it's the right call just because we're not engaged in combat yet, and he could always back up a little bit to get out of my charge range since I am just out of charge with the mummies right now. So my opponent could back up even more or just stay within the giant's charge, take 1 charge since the Shamblers did not die. So yeah, I think it's a smart point to just keep the unicorn out of it for now. And the rest of the army also doesn't really move because it doesn't have to. You can see the Wind Blast movement, so that Tree Herder was shoved backwards. Always good because 1, the Tree Herder isn't that fast. It's only a speed 6. And 2, it's not going to run because it wants to cast Aura of Heroism. So I bought myself another turn of maybe keeping this thing out of combat if I choose to not engage as well. With my opponent shooting, we've got the Heart Piercers here, although, I don't know. Because the Soul Snare did so poorly on the wounds onto the Shamblers, I actually had to go for the Wind Blast here. I wanted originally to Wind Blast these guys, because if I shove them out of the woods, they then have to move forward to touch it again because they'd be behind the woods. They can't see anything. So, you know, you take what you get. And yeah, they end up shooting, I believe they end up shooting into my Enslaved Guardians, doing 2-ish damage, while this Unicorn and this Beast of Nature both fire into my chariots, looking to kill them off, but do pretty poorly on their hits and wounds as well. And I believe these chariots are stuck at 2 wounds. Actually, on my turn, I forgot to mention that Mortibris had cast Heal onto these chariots, who had 5 wounds on them, and he just heals all 5. So yeah, they were completely unwounded, but you know, it's what happens. You just got a lot of heal. You get a lot of variance like that. And here is the end of turn shot because I forgot to take an action shot, looks like. So yeah, you can see, I think this shows off that these Heart Piercers did not do any damage to my Enslaved Guardians, it looks like. But we do end up with some damage on my chariots. It's like 2 or 3 damage total. And lastly, we get, oh no, here we go. Whatever. So we do get some damage onto my chariots here. The beast only does, let's see, does 4 damage to me, gets me up to 10 wounds, needs a 5, you know, with no reroll because I have no Inspire over there, and rolls a 4. So my chariots are still there, still ready to fight. And we move on. Here's an action shot. Yeah. Oh, here's the end of turn shot. I just got apparently 2 shots in my opponent's turn. So yeah. You can see 1 or 2 damage is done to these enslaved guardians. Like I just said, these guys end up getting up to 10 and not killed off, and these chariots take 2 or 3 damage and don't go bye-bye. Now, one thing that's interesting does happen, which is my opponent remembers he has Critter's Call and casts it onto the Soul Snare that's now revealed itself, and only manages 1 hit, which is a big deal because Critter's Call has to wound to actually do anything, but unfortunately he gets the wound, so there's no roll because the Soul Snare is a dash 15, but I cannot cast next turn, which is unfortunate. So we move on to turn 3. Turn 3, the Lucky Chariots just go back into the Beasts of Nature, again looking to cause 1 wound to turn off that Flight and Lightning Bolt. Any turn that they live past their initial charge is just bonus rounds for them as I see it. And I decide to take the charge with the giant that was here into the Shamblers. I just really need these Shamblers to be gone. They are down to 6 wounds now because I believe my opponent healed it with the Unicorn again. So yeah, I'm just looking to kill off these Shamblers. I will almost certainly lose my giant in the process, but it will force my opponent to actually come forward, as right now I can't force him to, and I can't really break up the combat line at all, because if I just move forward, right, and even if I, like right here, these guys, they might look like they are on a flat plane with each other. That was a great line. But they might look like they're on a flat plane, but they are not. The mummies are slightly in front of the enslaved guardians, right? Just to limit the amount of things that can actually charge into them. It should be the inverse. I messed that one up. The enslaved guardians should be in front because the mummies have a lower frontage than, say, these earth elementals. So what you want to do is something like that, so you can't get 3 units, right? So a tree herder, Shamblers, and the earth elementals all cannot charge mummies because the mummies are smaller frontage than the unit that would be in the middle, the earth elementals, right? So instead you can only get 2 units into them. But anyway, I digress. I do advance forward a little bit. I don't think it looks like these mummies didn't advance at all, or maybe I just didn't advance them very far because I don't want them to be that close. I advance the left mummies up to the charge range of the earth elemental, so they're still out of the charge there, but if the earth elementals take this charge into my giant, I will still be in charge to counter there, or if this guy goes into here, I've got some pretty sick counters. So yep, that's the plan there. The archers actually do have to move forward this turn, and it's because I am eyeing this this objective right now. I don't want to surge forward because I could end up just easily surging too far and getting into this Birdo's charge range, and also because I want to cast Heal with Mortibris this turn, not Surge. So, and then I want to cast Blizzard with the Pharaoh, not Surge. So I just move the archers anyway. They're not the best shots. So they advance. The chariots stay put, as does the scorpion, just again protecting this area, as the chariots especially have a very far interdiction. So yep, pretty good. The soul snare just refaces and backs up a little bit, and that's about it. Oh, and the warriors advance out of the graveyard so that they are not hindered on a possible charge if my opponent decides to take this tree herder anywhere over here. So let's go into shooting. So with my shooting, I do actually get this one off, which is I fire Blizzard, my archers, and my chariots all into this unicorn. But in traditional Blizzard fashion, it misses with all of its shots. So that is 2 hits turn 1 and no hits turn 2 or 3. Then we have the archers and the chariots end up doing, ooh, that's a great line there. They end up doing 3 wounds to this unicorn, which is not the best, but I do roll a boxcar for the kill. So my opponent's like, well, that's a kill, so re-roll it. Upon reroll, we end up actually wavering it still because I roll a 10, so a 12 into a 10, pretty solid. So we got a wavered unicorn right there. And then in the soul snare cannot shoot, so that's the end of the... So I do end up casting with the enslaved guardians a wind blast onto the heart piercers this turn, and I end up pushing them 4 inches back, which knocks them out of the forest and makes it so they have to advance forward next turn if they want to shoot at all. So, I get that, and of course the chariots got this charge into Birdo. So here is the combat shot of one giant hoping to finally finish off these Shamblers, and here's the end of the turn shot. So yeah, the giant ends up not finishing off the Shamblers, and in fact does like 1 damage. No, my opponent must have just not moved the dial yet. I end up doing, I think I did 3 or 4 damage. So they are still a -16 because he did get Aura of Heroism off last turn, and my opponent did a little bit of a truffle shuffle with the Earth Elementals to make it so I cannot Wind Blast this Tree Herder again. So yeah, even with the 9 or 10 there, a giant still has brutal, so I believe I was looking for a 6 or a 7 to kill twice, and I don't roll it, so a little unfortunate there. And we move into the chariots that went back into Big Birdo, and I end up doing another wound, so I turn off its ability to shoot or fly this turn, and I'm feeling really good about that, down to 9 wounds on this dial. So moving on to turn 3 for the Forces of Nature. This is again, a simpler turn for my opponent. The Beast of Nature goes into my chariots, looking to finally finish them off. And yeah, because this giant, maybe this is what I wanted. I thought the giant could kill it on a, like on average dice. It does around 4 wounds. And then needs a 6 to kill twice. That's not the worst odds, but on top of it, I'm not really upset about this happening because I have to force my opponent forward. Right now I'm doing not a whole lot to do that, and I really want to break up the line. So right now, the Fire Elementals can't really advance forward due to the Shamblers still being alive and the Shamblers wanting to charge. And if my opponent, wow, that's great sound there. So if my opponent wants to get these Shamblers into the Giant and the Earth Elementals, well, my opponent has to actually get a countercharge with the Earth Elementals to get them out of the way. So with the Shamblers, so that the Earth Elementals can get into the flank. So that's what he does and goes in. And you can see now that we have various layers, right, that my opponent's at with the army over here, which is what I want. I want to be able to kill this one by one, as it's so tough that it's very unlikely that I will, well, it's not super unlikely, but it's not the best odds that I will one-shot any of these units. And even if I do, I face a pretty stiff fight back for me, so I'm not very mobile. I need to be able to force an overwhelming fight if I'm going to take one. So yeah, that's why I'm not really upset about my giant just going to its doom right here, and maybe it'll live, who knows. With my opponent shooting, I believe the Heart Piercers again go into the Enslaved Guardians, looking to just put a couple damage onto them. The Unicorn over on the left here, I think, is going to heal the Beast of Nature for the 2 points of damage I've done to it, just because it doesn't want any surge, shenanigans to go on. So yeah, that's fair. Or maybe a lightning bolt into these guys, but I think it's a heal. This beast is still not moving forward and is going to go for a lightning bolt onto my, what is this? The Soul Snare. I forgot what it was for a second there. The Soul Snare. So the Soul Snare is stealthy, but so is pretty much this entire side of the table. The Scorpion is out of Mortibrus's bubble, as are these mummies, but the Pharaoh, the Archers, and the Chariots all are in it, and they're all uninjured due to heal. So why not just try to kill the Soul Snare off? I don't know. I don't know where I would have gone. Not into any of the regen units, but probably something else. And moving forward here, wow, that is a great shot. So blurry, so wow. Let's move forward from that. So here is an end of turn shot. Let's start on the left. So the Beast of Nature does finally manage to kill off these chariots. It's actually just barely too. He only does like 1 or 2 damage and then rolls pretty low on that nerve check, but it's well within the parameters and kills them off and turns to face. Yeah, you can see there's no wound dial, so my opponent did go for a heal there. With all the shooting, I think these Enslaved Guardians are now up to like 3 or 4 damage, I want to say. So not a useless amount of damage, but not really all that big considering how much heal I have in the army. So, And the big thing that happens is my opponent goes in with these Shamblers and with these Earth Elementals into the front and the flank of a giant. And, 4+ to hit units, as speaking as someone playing an undead faction, sometimes they let you down, even on a flank charge. So goes into the flank, has 36 attacks with the Earth Elementals and only hits with like 11 of them, and then doesn't sink all that many wounds. The Giant is sitting on 10 wounds right now, and my opponent needs a 9 to break it. Doesn't roll it, and that's that. So really bad. My opponent's sitting here going like, well, that's probably game, because I can easily flank charge this horde of Earth Elementals with mummies if I want. So yeah, I've got at least 1 unit of mummies. We do determine that these mummies are in the flank, not in the rear. So yeah, I could take 2 there if I wanted, or I can take 1 in a pharaoh. I can do all sorts of things. So yeah, pretty big there. And let's see what we do with turn 4. So turn 4, here's what I end up doing. So first off, let's start on the left again. So I move forward with the Enslaved Guardians, and the plan here is I've got just a perfect line here that if I roll a 3+ on a surge, I can get into the flank of this tree herder. So I go for that. I also can wind blast these duders out of the woods again, just to block their line of sight. And the plan is to get a flank here and a front with mummies. That is 36 attacks on 4s, 36 attacks on 4s and 4s, 12 of which have elite and vicious. So I mean, it's a long shot for that tree herder. I did forget, or maybe I just didn't, well, yeah, I guess I did forget that the Aura of Heroism gives you +1/+1 nerve. I was thinking it was an 1820 when I did my numbers, and that doesn't sound like a big deal, but I do not want my Enslaved Guardians to get rear charged by a beast and by a unicorn. So with my numbers, I was going for something like that, but anyway, we move like that. The spearmen actually, or not spearmen, warriors have to move in this very sort of oblique fashion, and it's because I wanted to make sure that my Cursed High Priest here would be within 6 inches, just barely to this point right here, so that I could heal, or not heal, but inspire the Enslaved Guardians for the inevitable countercharge, since even if I kill this tree herder, I'm going to eat at least, well, I'm either going to eat another tree herder in the, well, no, because my mummies will move forward. But anyway, I could eat another unit in the rear. It's either going to be a Beast of Nature or it's going to be a tree herder, right? And then one of these units in the front, right? Or 2 of these units. So it's almost certainly going to be a flank. No, that's right. I don't know. Let's just stop talking about it. Moving forward, yeah, that was the plan with that sort of movement. It's a little complex. Then I've got these mummies right here, along with a pharaoh going into the flank of these unwounded Earth Elementals. And this is a mistake I make right here, which is I take this giant and countercharge into the Shamblers again, but because my opponent has placed this Beast of Nature perfectly in front of the unicorn, or the winged unicorn, I can shoot it, right? But it has cover against my shots. It's just not the best. And I think what I should have done is just taken this giant, made sure that the Earth Elementals were dead, and then put all of my shots into the Shamblers, right? Because if I can just kill off the Shamblers here with shooting, which I probably can, they're still sitting on quite a few wounds. I think after, yeah, because they didn't get any heal last turn, so they must be on 9 wounds there, since that's definitely a 0. So my opponent is probably on 9 wounds right there. I've got a Soul Snare, I've got, archers and chariots. I should have just gone for that, but I don't. I send the giant there, and yeah, so mistake 1 of the game, if you want to call it. And moving forward to the action shot, pretty cool shot here. I actually really like it, but that's just because of my opponent's miniatures, not because of anything else. I guess it's not blurry, unlike this one. So yeah, this is the end math of the turn, which is I do end up getting this flank charge, so the surge works, and I do end up getting the wind blast out of the wood, so that works. But then when I charge into this tree herder, I just barely waver it instead of kill it by 1. So big deal there. Yeah, Aura of Heroism, just that math, it's good spell. So I end up bouncing. I also make a slight mistake here, which is that the warriors are a bit too far forward. They might have had to go there to get this guy still, or like, I don't want a flyer to just fly over and kill my Cursed High Priest. So I think they maybe had to be there to get the Cursed High Priest here, but if they didn't have to be there, the mummy, or the they should be a little bit farther back so the mummies can back up the inch, but they can't, so instead they're there. Then, yeah, this is very disappointing. The mummies and the pharaoh go into the flank of these earth elementals, and they just roll terribly. I've got 24 attacks on 4s and 4s with elite and vicious, and then I have 14 attacks on 3s and 3s with 1 reroll, and I think I do like 12 wounds or something like that. I don't do terribly well. And then because of this rally too, those earth elementals are a dash 20, I want to say. No, they're dash 17 base, right? Yeah, dash 17, so they're dash 19. I just don't roll it. So yeah, I really wish I'd taken the giant there. The giant does manage to kill off the shamblers, which is good. But again, the giant's actually right here at the beginning of its combat. And I roll it. I rolled this middle one first. So I don't manage. Well, first I rolled this to see if I could get rid of the inspire or the rally. And I waver it, so then I go to this combat to see how that turns out, and I don't do anything. So this giant ends up killing off the shamblers, but needs to roll a pretty far overrun to dodge danger here. Only manages a 2, so he just limps forward, looking to die. I did, with the soul snare, target these earth elementals, and that did 3 wounds as well, so only doing like 12 or whatever wounds is even worse, because it means I did like 9 in combat, because I know I did 3 wounds because I've healed the giant for 3. So, I mean, I've healed 4 total because of life leech, but yeah, just a mistake by me by sending that giant there. Shouldn't have done it. And yeah, you can see right here the Tomb Scorpion. It seems pretty obvious that, so let's do a better job of drawing that line. So yeah, it seems pretty obvious that this beast is obviously in its front, right? Like, you know, we can't really tell because of this angle, but I'm almost certain that that's what happened. But yeah, you might be guessing, well, why is he measuring that? Well, let's move on to turn 4 for the Force of Nature. And you can see this Beast of Nature is now in my flank. And I think either so like, I obviously didn't bump it, it's where it is. But maybe that beast got bumped, or maybe this base is where the beast is. I thought the base was where the unicorn was. So maybe that's what happened, who knows. But anyway, ends up in my flank, which is not good. But, you know, we can take it, I think. Not inspired, probably can't take it, but that's fine. The fire elementals get into the flank of my giant. That's not great, but you know, you take what you get. And then the earth elementals go into the pharaoh, looking to, well, not really looking to kill him off, but this tree herder wanted to get into my mummies to block them up, and the only way that could work, since if we roll a picture back, the tree herder is right here, right? And basically it can see just barely this little point on my base here, and with its one pivot, it pivots to this side, has to move directly forward and hit these mummies. It can't hit these mummies, and then it needs these guys to charge in first, so it has enough space to hit the mummies and not the earth elementals. So that is exactly what happens. This tree herder cannot charge due to the waver, so at least that's happening for me. These enslaved guardians are only down to 1 wound, so it's not the worst, but yeah, I don't know if I can weather this storm. The beast goes into the rear, the unicorn decides not to, and then we get a flank charge from these heart piercers as well. So, not the best turn for old Empire of Dust. My opponent does not have a lot of shooting. The shooting that he does have goes into heals. So we've got this unicorn, but just barely touching the woods, so it can heal up this tree herder, which is a good call. But my opponent didn't think about it while moving this unicorn, and it could have, or winged unicorn, it could have moved a little bit more like this to make sure that this tree herder was within range, because getting 2 heals better than 1, and instead has to split the heals onto the earth elementals instead. So yeah, probably a bit of a positioning mistake there, but live and learn. And here is an action shot. This gem should not be here. That represents the rally, but yeah. So here is the end of the turn. Starting on the left, you can see the enslaved guardians are gone. That's not that, you know, you might be like, yeah, of course they should. They got rear charged by that Beast of Nature. But that Beast of Nature does not do a lot of wounds to the enslaved guardians. I think he only manages like 6, maybe? Pretty bad. Most of the wounds, or not most of them, but quite a few of them, come from this unit of heart piercers who end up doing 5 wounds to me. So they've got 24 attacks on 5s, and then they wound me on 5. They sink 5. 5 wounds there. And so it puts me up to 12. I'm still a dash 18, so my opponent needs a 6 twice, but nails it. So a little unfortunate there, but that's just dice. I mean, I didn't position well, so it's not like I rolled in here double one to giant tree and then got rear charged by a million things. No, I just didn't do my math right when I was doing Aura of Heroism. So yeah, getting wrecked there. It's what I deserve. The mummies in the middle, thankfully, so when they backed up, they ended up grabbing one of the loot tokens, and they take 5 damage from this this tree herder, but that's not enough for a roll on mummies. Then the earth elementals end up doing 7 damage to this pharaoh, and you know, it's maybe a little high. Yeah, not that high though, because they've got Brew of Strength, so they're crushing 2, so they're hitting me on 18 attacks on 4s and 3s. So yeah, 7 attacks, or 7 wounds, thankfully does not kill it, so still there. I believe I actually do need to use my Inspire reroll though. So we've got that, and here is on the far right, this Beast of Nature does not manage to kill off the Scorpion. I think on average, a Beast of Nature does between 7 and 8 wounds, with all said and done, against my Tomb Scorpion, or against my Scorpion Husk, but doesn't even manage that. So that would be a 6 or a 7 to kill it, but doesn't even manage that. Instead gets 4 wounds, which is a 10. Doesn't roll it, so that Scorpion Husk is ready to rock. So let's move on to turn 5. So turn 5 looks like this. So starting on the left, you can see these skeleton warriors go into the Beast of Nature. It is a hindered charge, but I want to block up this whole side of the field. If I can turn off the Beast Flight, and then I'm also blocking up these Heart Piercers, that's great, as long as I sink 1 wound. I have 25 attacks, but it is on 6s, so 25 attacks on 6s and 5s. Ew, not the best, but hopefully I'll do at least 1 wound. I move this Priest right here, and this is mistake 2 of the game, which is I move to be exactly on the base of my, or butt to butt with these mummies, and again, if there's no clear threat of danger, well, I mean, there's a lot of flyers over here, but meh, whatever. At this point, there's not a best threat. I should really be 1 inch back, so assuming that I bounce back, especially considering this tree is pretty difficult to kill, and mummies are a 4+ to hit unit. So yeah, I should definitely be 1 inch back to allow them to fall back, but I am not. So instead I'm there. The other mummies go into the other tree herder, the undamaged tree herder, and the pharaoh, along with the tomb scorpion, go to finish the earth elementals. So the earth elementals are sitting on, let's see, I said they were at 12 before. I think my opponent has actually healed 4 damage off them, so they're on 8 damage right now. Not the best, considering there's no Rally 2, but there is Rally 1 on this tree. And this tree was also healed for quite a few wounds, so because of this unicorn. So it's a rocky one, but we went for it. These chariots try to do the same thing that the chariots on the left did, which is just go in on this Beast of Nature. They are hindered due to touching the trees. That's a bit of a scorpion problem there, but yeah, we are hindered, but all I need is the 1 wound. That'll do. The soul snare is right here. This is actually not where it ends up being, because I moved it 2 inches to the right just so it could shoot, and then I went, wait, no, that's a dumb idea. So it's originally like here-ish somewhere, and instead I decide to pivot a bit and move forward as far as I can to get a line of sight onto this unicorn. That unicorn's still on 3 damage. I have a horde of archers that can shoot it due to it being height 3. It'll have cover, but they can shoot at it. And then I'll also have a soul snare just to try to nail that little unicorn off the table. So that's that. And let's go into the action. So yeah, 25 on 6s, go for it, guys. And here's what happened. So the Scorpion just hero rolls here. I mean, it's got 16 attacks on 4s, and then it wounds on 4s with this Crush 2 with Vicious, and it does like 10 wounds. So these walruses are on like 18 wounds. No, I think it does better than that. It must do at least 12 wounds, because I know my opponent gets to that 20 already before the Pharaoh rolls. And of course I double 1 it. So yep, double 1s are back to stay, and that is a real bad time to do it. And here is the end of turn shot. Again, a little blurry. This is a very late night game. But yeah, so the walruses, the earth elementals are still here. That's really unfortunate. I really wanted them gone so that I could turn to face with this scorpion, stare at the fire elementals, probably, well, maybe die. The scorpion's only on 3 wounds right now. Those fire elementals come in with, like 9-ish hits and then 6-ish wounds. That's only getting me to a 10, and I am currently, well, I guess it's a 4 twice. It's, But with the way we're rolling here, those aren't the best odds. But yeah, I double one it, so it doesn't happen. And I do end up healing quite a few wounds here, and it's because my regen does pretty well. Actually, the regen here does very well. No, I healed. That's right. So the regen here and the regen here do at least reasonably well. Might look like Mortimer's is out, but he's just barely within 12 of my Pharaoh to cast heal there. And I could also cast a lightning bolt onto this unicorn, or this, not unicorn. Yeah, it is a unicorn, winged unicorn. But I decide in the end, I end up doing no damage with my archers. I do 3 damage with the soul snare. It's on 6, so I'm looking for a 6 to waver. That's pretty much the magic number. And this Pharaoh was actually fairly wounded. I think I only regen 2 of the wounds, so it was on 5 wounds. And I wasn't willing to just lose my Pharaoh for that. So instead, Mortimer's casts heal, and heals at least 4 of them because I life leech the last, or he heals 5 and life leech doesn't matter. But anyway, that is the end of turn shot. You can see, well, and I didn't mention, I forgot about this side, which is these mummies. Yeah, they don't manage to kill off the tree herder. No surprise there. These mummies do kill off the tree herder, but because these skeleton warriors are in their way, and because I backed this guy just perfectly to be on their butt, I can't back up 1 inch, and they are in a very precarious position, which some of you might have already noticed. Not the best, especially as these skeleton warriors go in with their 25 attacks and do 0. So no damage there. Not unexpected though. And let's move forward onto turn 5 for the forces of nature. So first off, we've got this beast of nature who has an easy flank charge onto my mummies, and unfortunately, this tree herder also has a flank charge onto my mummies because of this dumb wizard positioning. So yeah, I can take a beast of nature to the flank because those mummies are at dash 19, they've got no damage on them, and they're def 5. I'm not super worried about it, but taking a flank from both it and the tree herder, ooh, that's a lot of dice here. So yeah, not the best there. You can see the double ones coming back to bite me, where the earth elementals now can go into my tomb scorpion, looking to kill it off. This little unicorn that I failed to waver, I don't know if I mentioned that, needed a 6, didn't roll it, gets into the flank of the tomb scorpion just to make sure it goes down. And because I rolled a double 1 there, these fire elementals are now free to charge into the flank of my chariots. Now you saw that a beast of nature before, which I did end up wounding and turning off its flight, a beast of nature before had a hard time killing wounded chariots. Unwounded chariots, especially with a healer back here and Inspire to back it up, that beast of nature is not going to budge those chariots. But because I double won it, these fire elementals are free to come. Oh, that's a great one. That was a John Madden bit. Are free to come into the flank here instead of just be able to charge this tomb scorpion instead. So yeah, I mean, they could have charged the flank anyway, but if they do that, the tomb scorpion can just do whatever it wants. I don't really fear a front charge from a unicorn at all, but double ones happens. And yeah, that's about it. Let's go into the action shot. I love this shot mostly because this channel, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, doesn't feature the most painted models, but in this one shot, everything's painted. Everything is fully painted. Good job, us. Moving on, end of turn shot. So we've got on the left, you can see, yeah, the Beast of Nature and this tree herder do kill off one of my regiments of mummies, which is very unfortunate, especially because the Beast of Nature does nothing. Does like 2 wounds. Nothing at all to these mummies. All the damage comes from this freaking tree herder who's got 14 attacks, I believe, 7 attacks base. So 14 attacks on 3s and 2s with 1 reroll and does like 11 wounds to me. So just rolls crazy, kills them. Very unfortunate, and all again due to my poor positioning of a wizard. So I hope to think about that in the future. Hopefully I'll ruminate on it. You can see the reposition. So yeah, the Tomb Scorpion does end up getting killed off, and it's actually because of the Unicorn, if I remember correctly. Or either the Unicorn was instrumental or the Unicorn missed with all of its attacks. One of these two units just completely flubbed. So anyway, the Earth Elementals turn to face the Pharaoh, just looking down. And things are looking a little dicier right now. I've got 1 loot and my opponent has 0, but I don't have that many units left. I've got, let's see, units that can hold it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 units that can hold loot, and 1 already has loot on it. So I really have 3 units, while my opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units that can hold the loot. Oh no, 8 units that can hold the loot. Woof, that is rough for the Empire of Dust. But, you know, that's what happens. And we move on to turn 6. Let's see if I can pull it out of my butt here. So turn 6, I do these skeleton warriors. I don't end up turning because it's kind of a pain in the butt. It was getting late. But they are facing this way to get a flank charge onto that Beast of Nature, hoping to, again, ground it. You can see that they've taken a bit of damage. That is because these heart piercers are shooting at them along with the unicorn. Although the unicorn might have been going for some heals as well. But anyway, they're getting shot for a minimal amount of damage. I think they're on 3 right now, 3 or 4. Then I do get a sneaky little nimbly bimbly charge with my Pharaoh because these mummies charge in first, then the Pharaoh rates itself, goes forward, and then nimbles, gets into this unicorn, looking to kill it off. Because if I can kill the unicorn... Okay, so here's the plan. Let's talk about the middle first. That's easy. The mummies go into the tree herder. It is on a few damage. I'm just looking to kill it off. If I kill it, that'd be great. If I waver it, that would also be great. And I can't charge anything else. I could have turned them like this and gone for a charge onto this Beast of Nature, but that does not help me because I get rear charged by this. I'd rather eat 1 flank, 1 front than 2 flanks or a front and a rear. So either or, it's good for me. And I misposition this wizard again, because the plan is do search these guys, do 1 wound, turn off the flight. That's great. But I need to lock down this path to the mummies, and my plan was to move this wizard forward, and apparently I just got lazy about halfway through. The wizard needs to be an inch away from this Beast of Nature and right in front of it. So when it pivots, it can't pivot past my base. Now it will, it can just charge into this individual and overrun into my mummies, but 1, it'll need to do that. And kill off this wizard, which is not the easiest. I mean, Curse High Priests are a -13 nerve, and I've got Rally 1, so they'll be a -14. So -14, that thing only has 7 attacks on 3s and 2s with Vicious. So not the best odds to kill it. And secondly, only this Beast of Nature will be able to do that, because these skeletons will be an inch away from it, thus precluding any other units from being able to get a charge, because there's not enough space. I don't think. No, there is enough. No, there's not. Yeah, it's only a 20 mil base. Yeah, so there's not enough space. But instead, I don't move it, so mistake number X of the game, number 3, number 10, something like that. Number 2 for this friggin' wizard, that's for sure. And on the right, things are done a bit better, which is, first off, the Soul Snare moves forward as far as it can and still cast. It can actually run because it's not a shambling unit, but yeah, I just move it forward so it can cast. I need to be able to kill off these Earth... Oh, I would love to be able to kill these Earth Elementals because I only need to do 1 damage to them. They still have like 20-ish wounds on them, so 1 damage and it's a not double 1s and they're dead. The Pharaoh wanted to kill off this Unicorn because, again, I'm trying to remove as many scoring units this turn as possible. The Archers, I wanted to be able to shoot at these Earth Elementals, but I just couldn't and also get the loot counter, so instead I pivot them to be as far away from the Fire Elementals as possible, because Mortibris just runs in front. Mortibris is a great unit. Obviously, giving that stealth bubble is really good in either Undead or Empire of Dust. He has great spells, great spell list, but also the thing that I recommend, or that I love the most, is that Mortibris is really hard to take out. He's a 15-17, I want to say, nerve, so really high nerve, def 4, so that's not going to matter against these fire elementals, but it matters against other things, and then stealthy, so difficult to take out with shooting. So I just run out in front, or to put some pip damage onto him. It's not worth it. Individual with stealthy, meh. So I just run in front of the fire elementals, looking to lock them up. It's pretty difficult for them to one-round me because they're a 4+ to hit unit. So 4s and 2s with 18 attacks, that's not that many wounds, and I have very high nerve. So looking for a little magic there. And even then, they have to kill Morgana and then have to get a 3+. So they only have a 66 chance of getting into these archers anyway. And one Beast of Nature is not physically capable of killing off archers. If all 7 attacks hit and wound, that's still a 16 that they need to roll. So that's the plan. The Pharaoh charged in not only just to kill off this unicorn, but also because there's not enough space. So normally the Soul Snare only moved 5 forward, so these Earth Elementals could still pivot and maybe hit my archers, but they can't due to the lack of space between them and the Pharaoh. So that's the plan. Let's see how it executes. Here is an action shot of my shooting. So I fire off with the Soul Snare into these friggin' Earth Elementals. I get 7 hits, so things are looking good. All 7 fail to wound. So I do 0 wounds. The Earth Elementals are still alive. Good job, Soul Snare. But here is the end of turn shot, which is starting on the right. Since I already talked about this, the Pharaoh ends up killing off the unicorn, so that's great, and it turns to face like so. It's not looking like that, but again, it was just getting late. So we both know which way he's facing. It's facing towards my side of the table, so there's still nowhere to go there. So that's good. My archers do 1 damage to this Beast of Nature, not enough to do anything. And then in the middle, my mummies go into this tree herder and do a couple damage, but not enough to waver it, so that's unfortunate. And last bit of misfortune, which is these skeletons, these skeleton warriors who went into the flank, have 50 attacks, but only on 6s, fail to hit with all 50 of them. So now I have thrown 75 attacks at this bird, and not only have I not wounded it, which, whatever on that, but I have not hit it. 75 attacks on 6s, 0 hit. So yeah, that's just the toughest bird, or the most wily bird, I guess. It's slippery. So Skeleton's not able to handle that. And we move into turn 6 for the Forces of Nature. So turn 6 Forces of Nature, pretty similar shot here. So first off, we've got this unicorn. My opponent was deliberating whether he wanted to flank charge here, or maybe go into the mummies just to make sure that they get killed off, because there is a small bit of space, because again, worst positioned wizard ever to charge there. But then I'm like, yeah, you need to grab that loot token. And he was like, right. I remember why the unicorn's over here. So the unicorn grabs the loot token, just sits there, probably looking to lightning bolt, maybe. These guys just shoot at the skeleton warriors. There's no reason to charge them, as getting a counter charge just gives me an opportunity to get more attrition points if there's a turn 7. So it doesn't go for that, and is unlikely to do any damage, even though that this is a rear charge, right? So these heart piercers would have 36 attacks, but 36 attacks on 5s and 4s versus 12 attacks on 4s and 3s. So you get +1, +1.5 wounds. It's just not that big of a deal. So it does not charge there. The Beast of Nature, because I have not wounded it with these skeleton warriors, goes into the flank of my mummies. Not that that would have mattered because I didn't position this well, but I digress. Goes into the flank there. The tree herder goes into the front. The earth elementals go into my soul snare. Goodbye, soul snare. I knew you well. And the fire elementals go into Morgana, and the beast does go into the archers, awaiting the fire elementals. So going in, there is no shooting to be done besides a bit here, and they just shoot, they pew into my skeleton warriors and don't do enough damage. They might actually do enough damage for a roll there, but whatever it is, it doesn't do anything. And here is an action shot just showing off, again, almost fully painted if you ignore these and ignore the basing here. But anyway, cool shot. And here is the end of turn. So starting on the left, you can see, well, first off, the skeleton warriors are still here, but more importantly, the mummies are here. They've got a lot of damage on them. They've got at least 10 damage. They are a -19 due to my rally 1 still being up, but my opponent rolls it and doesn't kill him. I think they've actually got, let's see, like 14 wounds on him, I want to say. It's a lot. It's a lot of damage because my opponent rolls it, and I remember him not needing a particularly difficult roll and rolling exactly under it due to Rally 1 really kicking in there. So, oof, Rally, great ability. Well, it's great in this. It's not great I'm not a big fan of it in Ratkin, but that's a story for a different day. So yeah, the mummies are still up, leaving me with that loot token, which is great. And then the walruses easily kill off my soul snare. I don't even make my opponent roll it. We just double one it. Moving forward, and here it is. The fire elementals go into Mortibrus, and they do crazy damage. They hit me with like 12 or 13 attacks or something like that, and I'm like, and then sink 11 wounds onto him, kill him on the first roll, and on the reroll, don't even waver him. So whew, Mortibrus, good job, buddy. You did exactly what I wanted you to do, because this Beast of Nature does go into the skeletons, does a couple of damage here. This Beast of Nature is just a disappointment this whole game, but does a couple of damage to the skeleton archers, but not enough, nowhere near rolling it. I think he only does 2 damage, and so we roll off to see if the game ends. It's super important right now, because if it ends, I automatically win, right? But if it keeps going, I'm not sure I win. I'm not sure what I do here. So we roll off, and bam, my opponent does not get another turn. It ends on turn 6. So we look at the loot. The Empire of Dust has 2 pieces of loot, and the Force of Nature only 1. So it's a 2-to-1 victory. A pretty Pyrrhic one, though, as most of my units are either dead or near dead. So definitely a messy one. I hope you guys liked the report. If you see any more mistakes or things that I could do differently, Lord knows, really just position this wizard would be great. But yeah, feel free to leave them in the comments. And until next time, bye.